Good morning. Today, rather than historical play, we're going to be going over a drill. This is a drill we do at the club that I call the stretching drill, and it's really about combining your footwork and using it to manipulate and control and extend your effective range going forward and backwards, which is why we call it the stretching drill. So there are a couple things that are really important to keep in mind, and the first part is that you really want to think about movement coming from the ground, from the balls of your feet. So what a lot of people do is they kind of fall and catch. So the weight shifts first and then they catch themselves. And in a way, that's how we walk, right? Walking is kind of controlled falling. But what we want to do is we want to drive from the ball of the foot, of the back foot, and then the foot that becomes the back foot. So what I mean by that is the first part of your motion should actually be driving off the ball of the foot on this back foot. This is really important. This lets us power a shot if we're staying put. It lets us power and then transfer if we go through. It also lets us have more flexibility in the kind of step we're making. So if I'm falling and catching, I kind of have to do this. If I'm starting the motion with the back foot, I can push and roll through. I can also push and let the front foot float on the ball of the foot. And so that's how you get a passing step and a shuffle step off of the same initial motion. And so one of the things we do in the class is I call it the Tai Chi sway. It's kind of silly looking, but we push off the back ball of the foot to start the weight shift, and then we push off the front ball of the foot to get the weight shift. So if you're having trouble feeling it, I would actually just start going back and forth. And I do whole footwork lessons on this. I'm just trying to give you some kind of basic things to think about as we go into the stretching drill itself. What we're going to do is in the club, this is a partner drill. And so we have the striker and the target person. We're going to use the pedal because we're on our own today. So what you're going to do is you're going to find your one-step range. And it doesn't really matter what weapon you're using. I'm using a long sword because that's what I generally fight with. But I want to find where with a single passing step, I can comfortably hit with the right part of the sword, right? So I'm just kind of reaching in. You can back it out a little bit so that you're maybe just hitting with the end because this is about finding range. And then what we're going to do, so in the club, the target person would take a half step back. So what we're going to do is we are going to take a half step back. And now you see what happens is when I do my step, I'm out of range. So what I'm going to do is as I push off the back foot, I'm going to push, and as the weight shifts, I'm going to push off the front foot and recover. And so this is how I'm getting a step and a half. And so now, where with my old step, my range is maybe a little short, with this step and push, or we call it a pass gather step, because I'm going to pass the foot. Now I'm landing with plenty of range. So again, with just the passing step, I'm a little out of range. And I don't want to reach because this breaks my structure. So that's not a good solution to the problem of extending our range. But if we can combine our footwork with a pass gather or a pass push, right? We pass, push the back foot, land, I have plenty of range and I'm still in balance. I have not broken my structure to try and get some extra range. So once we have that, we have our pass push, come back, pass push, come back. In the club, the target person would take another half step back. So because we're doing this on the pedal, we're going to take another half step back. So now you can see I'm way out of range. But can I still pass push and land where I can still hit with good structure? I don't want to compromise my structure to get extra range. So again, and so the stretching part of this drill is how far back can I get and still comfortably in balance step forward and land a shot. And what you're going to find, at least what I find, what most of my students find, is that their effective range is much longer than they think. And so we kind of stretch this out, and the target person will continue taking half steps until it just gets to kind of a ridiculous point where even with good footwork, it's just a little too far out. But I think you'll find when you're practicing on the pedal that your effective range is much longer than you think while still being in balance. This is the stretching drill. So again, I look pretty darn far away from the pedal. And if I just pass, I'm going to miss. And so I could commit the sin of breaking my structure to try to land. Or I can pass, push, and land just fine. You can also do what we call the gather pass. And what that means is when we do the same flexing off the back foot, rather than pushing through and then pushing off the left, we can actually use that flex to project our front foot forward. So it's a gather pass, and we get the same effect. And depending on what you're trying to accomplish, you're going to use one or the other. I find when I'm attacking, if I'm a little out of range with that single step, if I start with this front foot floater, often the opponent doesn't see it. It's a pretty subtle motion. So don't think that these little adjustment steps, these little shuffle steps have to be big, because they're not. Because that could also put you out of balance and your opponent's going to see it. We want very subtle things that the opponent doesn't see. So we just kind of float past. And that gives us lots of range. So we can be way back here, float past. Plenty of range, no problem. So if you are still in a place where you kind of have to practice by yourself, I would do this on a Pel. If you are with people, then you can have one person find their one-step range on the opponent, practice that a couple of times, and then have the opponent take a half step back and practice these kind of gather, pass, and pass, gather stretches where you're able to make up that range in good balance. The reason we do this is so we're essentially doing one step. It's a combination movement, but we land in balance. It's very important. And make sure you're recovering. What sometimes people do is they'll do this little pass and they'll push and they'll end up like this. And okay, it's better, but I'm kind of stuck here. So we really want to make sure that when we're doing this pass push, we recover the back foot as well, so we can roll into the next thing. So that's really important. So that's the first half of the stretching drill, is just figuring out what your effective range can be still in balance. And I think you'll find that the range is much longer than you thought. The other half of the drill, which is kind of tough if you're still stuck by yourself fighting your Pel, but more places are opening, so I'm at least going to talk about the second half. So as the target person, your job is just stand there, get whacked, take a half step back, get whacked, take a half step back, and so on and so forth. That's the first part of the drill. The second part of the drill, you're actually going to get into stance facing the opponent, the person who's going to strike you. And they're going to practice just doing the step and hit. And then what you're going to do is when they step to hit you with their single pass and hit, you're going to pass back. So now you're using motion to extend the range while they're cutting. And what they should find is that they're airballing if they're just doing their pass and you're doing your pass. And so after you've done that a few times to get the feel of it, now the striking person is going to do their combination step, their pass gather or their gather pass. And now when you do your single pass, you're still going to get hit. So now you're giving your opponent the ability to kind of compute the range and put that combination step together in motion. Once that feels comfortable, now you get to do a combination step. So the backwards motion, we still make it happen with this front foot. We don't want to reach. If I reach, my torso stays put, which means I could be stepping back, but my head and body stay in range. So the reason we do the push is I want my core to be leaving immediately. So so I can push back and pass, or I can push back and now on the front foot, just that little bit. And again, what you will find is that even with your opponent doing that combination step, that pass, gather, gather, pass, if you do your own combination step, they should still be missing because now you're extending your range. And so now your defensive ability to move back is greatly extended. And this is really a nice thing. The last little piece, and now finally the person who's been very patiently getting hit this whole time, they get to win. Now what you're going to do with whatever weapon or guard you have, but when you do your pass gather, because we've been doing this in balance, we should be able to bounce by pushing off the back ball of the foot and land a counter strike. So now we're forcing the opponent to airball and then coming right back in to hit. And a lot of people, they find that transition difficult because they load their weight. So if I come here and my weight is back and this front foot is light because I put all my weight back here, it's very hard to smoothly come back. So when I do my push, my weight should be balanced so that with just that little push off the back foot, off the back ball of the foot, I can kind of almost let gravity pull me back in. So if you're doing the countering part where you finally get to hit this guy back who's been smacking you 50 times for this drill, push, 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 and always come back into a good balanced guard. So this is the stretching drill. You can definitely do the offensive part just on the Pel yourself. The defensive part is a little bit harder on your own, but I would definitely recommend practicing because people usually are not as comfortable going backwards. Practice even just looking at your Pel. Okay, what's my defensive kind of ranging back with a passing step? And then if I do a pass, a little push, make sure I'm in balance, and then maybe I even push and then pass. And you're gonna find that with little motion, it's not a lot of effort, you're way out of range. And this is really important if you are a type of fighter like myself who wants to get in, do their thing, and then get out, because you want to be efficient and in balance all the time. Because if something goes wrong, you don't want to be stuck somewhere because of the way you're doing your footwork. So play with that. Next week, I'm actually going to go over a slow motion footwork balance drill that really focuses on that weight shift and staying in balance through the whole time. So if you're finding any of these movements awkward or clunky, please send me messages and questions, but know that I plan to go a little bit more in depth into the weight shifting stuff in next week's video, and then eventually I'll get back into some historical plays. But this is what we're doing right now so that my brain gets a break. Have a good one.